Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of the Art of Prevention podcast. And today, coming back for part two, is Jake Aleck. And in the last podcast, I recommend everyone start out with part one, or if you're more of an endurance athlete, then starting out with part two will do you just fine. But in part one, we discussed controlling the controllables, how we can leverage consistency to maximize our performance as well as maximize and reach our genetic potentials. And now we're transitioning from talking about some of the things that we can do on a daily basis to talking more about endurance running training, and it's specifically how Jake managed to transition from an athlete that never ran more than 8 yards at a time to qualifying for the Boston Marathon and hitting 26.2 at a pretty dang fast pace, especially for somebody with a lot of muscle mass on him still. So, Jake, I'm going to let you take it away now and tell us about why you had this drive to become an endurance athlete. I mean, for the longest time, you've been putting up huge numbers in the weight room, doing CrossFit, just crushing workouts, things like that. What made you want to transition over to running a marathon?
So it all started in chiropractic school. Every clinician can understand this in PT and chiro. I mean, shoot, anyone that's gone through the rigors of graduate level classes, and I had to figure out that I had to put myself through grueling training to mentally get through school. So, and I lived downtown at the time. I was in Tri-1. I was in the middle of this report that we were writing up, and then right next to the web page I was on, it said Chicago Triathlon. And I'm like, well, I have never swum for more than at our lake house, jumping onto tubes. Biking, we do some of that with football training, and running. Well, we just did that, south of 100 yards, and definitely not quite often, but on the gridiron, right? So I was like, let's try that. It's in a month, right? So signed up for that, and literally the day that I clicked signed up, my building I lived at had an outdoor flat pool at it. So I was like, okay, I got goggles here. I'm gonna go down there. I'll just give this thing a shot. Go down there, and I swim eight, down, back, 2, down, back, 4, down. I do that 8 times. So literally 8 down backs, or down back 4 times, essentially. My heart rate was just like bouncing, and I'm like, okay, all right, let me do my math here. How many times do I have to do that in this, triathlon? And it was 67. I'm like, oh my God. And I have 35 days. So I put myself, I'm like, I'm swimming every single day, and I'm just going to do intervals and gradually. And it wasn't until day 29 or 30 where I actually did the 67 nonstop, didn't put my feet on the ground. And I just got out of there, and I was just like, let's go. Cause I was like, all right, I just, you've realized how bad you are at something and what do I have to do to get to that point. So that was my kickstart into anything endurance cause prior to that, 5Ks for charities on the weekends, we would, volunteer for, but that got it going. And then I got the endurance bug and just started, I did about 3 triathlons, 2 Olympic, 1 sprint. And then it kind of got into the world of half marathons.
Amazing. And then for some reason, that drive kind of pushed you to doing well, and you qualified for Boston. Have you run Boston yet, or?
No. So Boston's in just over 1 month from today. Last year we ran the Virginia Beach, and because there's a handful of people in town here that we're kind of like our runner circle, which, well, I'm just going to put this out here. Runners are their own type of people. Can we agree?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. We can agree. All right. So that's actually one of my passion of when I opened up my clinic down here. I was like, okay, I understand gait. I understand all the mechanics and everything about running, but I'm never going to get a runner in here unless I show them that I can be one of them, right? Join the club, right? So when I was like, all right, well, I'll run with a handful of people here that, do long runs, and I got to know them, and they're like, hey, we're doing this race. You want to do this race with us? Okay, I'll do this race. And then I started giving myself goals. And then the 3-hour time limit was such an elite level time that I think it's less than 3% of marathoners, or it's something crazy that not many people can achieve. So I was like, all right, well, let's make that the goal. So then into my programming world, I said, all right, we're signing up for last March. It was 2 days after my birthday, because it was the Yingling Shamrock Shuffle, or Yingling, Shamrock Marathon in Virginia Beach. It was like March 20th last year, and I just 18 weeks. I read a handful of different marathon books, advanced marathoning being one, the Hansen method being two. There's the what's Hal Higdon's programs I've seen a couple times. So I've kind of like took all their principles that they commonly overlap with, and just made my own program and just said, okay, this is the end result, how do we start with that 18 weeks prior to? And I achieved the goal of 2 hours, 59 minutes, and 58 seconds. So 2 seconds short of 3 hours, with a gnarly headwind in the last 5 miles of the race. So that was then, and then now we're training for Boston now.
Did you kick it in at the end, or was it just like let the cards fall where they may?
So there was a pacer, and by time we got to like the back part of the race, where there's like a 5 mile, you get over a bridge and you have 5 miles on this boardwalk, and the pacer looked at me and goes like, what do you need? I go, sub 3, because he was backtrack that our initial pacer at mile 10 like just couldn't hang and like was gone. At like mile 8, I saw this guy and I'm like, there's no way this guy is hanging on for 26 miles. So he just like drifted. And then just after the half marathon, some random guy came in holding the 3 hour stick. And he's like, hey guys, what time are you guys at? I'm like, this dude's our pacer. He doesn't even know what time we're at right now. So by time we're running with all these 9, 10 people, they're all chatting. My wife always laughed at it. She was like, man, all these guys were talking like it's, walk in the park. You're just sitting there just trucking right behind everyone. And then we go over this back part where there's like pretty much no one can see. And then we go back over the bridge, and it's me and this tall guy, the one pacer, and it's just him and I. And he's like, what do we got to get you at? I'm like, sub 3. I looked down at my watch and I saw we had 5 miles left. If I wasn't at 100% effort for the last 5 miles, there was zero chance I was making. Like I told myself, don't look at the watch. I look at the watch, I know that I'm like not at 100%. Just go. But the worst part is, how long 5 miles can take.
Oh my God, yeah.
So it's not like, hey, 10 yards, 100%. It's like, no, 28 minutes, 100%. And I'm like, but we were able to get it done. So
that's amazing. And one of the things that to me is incredible, because my running career was plagued by injury, is that you were able to transition from strength and power athlete to big time endurance training. I mean, you told me just now you're in the thick of Boston training, and you're in the midst of like a 70-mile week or something like that, right? Which is pretty, that's a respectable amount of mileage for 1 week, with full-time clinic and having a wife and dogs and shit like that to take care of as well.
Well, Nick, what do you always tell runners that come into your clinic that typically they're not doing in their training or haven't done in their entire life?
One of the biggest things is strength training,
So that was my foundation for 22 years of life. So automatically there, when people ask me, hey, how many strength days are you doing? I'm automatically going to be a little bit less in frequency of doing that than what they should be doing at zero amount of strength training, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's been my base for such a long time. So when it comes into the amount of mileage I can get in right now, it is a lot, but it's to the sacrifice that I don't need as much strength training as that I would actually recommend Dave or Donna if they're in front of me, if there's someone that hasn't gotten none in, because they truly need that balance in order to get through those miles. For me, if I get 2 strength days in a week, I'm fine with that, because that's just keeping me at that neurological aspect to just maximize what strength I have.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's been a real passion project of mine, is convincing, literally like just convincing runners like strength training is going to improve your capacity. It's going to improve your resilience and all of your connective tissues that you're using. It's not going to be a huge detractor from your training, and really will just benefit you, especially if it's done right. So what kind of things will you have your runners do in the weight room to improve their capacity, so then they're more resilient when they are logging in the miles?
Well, we always have the conversation of, I'll ask them, and just because I know what people's common answer is how many rep ranges should you do as an endurance athlete? And they'll be like, endurance, 15 to 20. I'm going to say, 1, where'd you hear that? Right? Because again, you always paint the picture of like, all right, where did you hear that? And you don't want to shame the person because, they said something that, maybe their biggest mentor in the world, or, the textbook they're reading at home says. But like we talked about when we last chatted, it's actually the adverse of that. We would have to be maybe at a high level, 8 reps at the highest, but more within that 4 to 6 range of just getting hard efforts done on very basic exercises that look like they can be done anywhere, anytime. Like realistically, even in the sports that I train with here in the high school level, a lot of them are foundational movements of split squatting, normal squats, goblet squats, walking lunges, normal pushing patterns, farmer's carry. I mean, things that Dan John talks about, this past weekend at Parker Seminars when we were there, all those foundational movements that just, hey, we're going to load you up in a heavy way where you're not going to do many reps of it, because we want it to be a true strength training dose to you, not a hypertrophy dose where it's kind of more that middle of the range. And again, coined endurance because a lot of blood's going to the muscle when you're doing it 15 or 20 times, but we just need you training in a hard effort.
I completely agree. And the big irony to me, which I didn't really know about, is that a lot of runners I need to do 12 to 15 repetitions for endurance, right? But the irony there is that's like more like hypertrophy type training. What are runners totally afraid of? Hypertrophy. And I'm gonna get so big. And it's like, I've now been strength training for a couple of years, and let me know what you guys are doing that makes
He's still wearing mediums, everybody. He's still wearing mediums.
Because the size has not happened. I mean, I'll tell you this story because it's just so embarrassing. I was doing single leg presses in the gym, working out with my girlfriend, and she's like looking at the weights that I'm putting on. She goes, "Wow, Nick, your legs are a lot stronger than they look." I'm like,
you know what? To us, that's an absolute compliment, but you kind of feel the subtle dig there. Like she kind of screw in and twist it a little bit.
She's the nicest person in the world, but I was like, Caitlin, are you kidding me right now? Like, that's like not a nice thing to say to a guy, like tell me the opposite or something.
She was so honest. No, that's awesome.
But that's one of those things where we can have amazing improvements in strength. And for a runner, that's going to translate to amazing improvements in running economy and not have huge gains in mass or in weight. So you'll actually feel lighter, you'll run faster. And the translation of running economy, it doesn't just make your race faster. It makes every single high intensity training effort that you do easier and more effective as well. Right. So I'm just such a huge proponent of strength training, and you already had that foundation for strength training. Now, how did you then start the running process? Like, how did you go from, only strength training to building up your mileage in a consistent fashion in a way that you did not actually get hurt? I hope that you're enjoying this episode of the Art of Prevention podcast. I wanted to let you know about a new resource that is available on our website. And this resource is specifically for runners who want to strength train. So we all know from our previous podcasts and many guests on the podcast that strength training is essential for runners to, 1, improve their running economy as well as decrease their chances of injury. For being an awesome listener to this podcast, all you have to do is go onto our website and click on the sports icon and then go down to running, and you'll see that PDF pop up, Strength Training for Runners. And for being an awesome listener, I'm giving a 20% discount if you type in podcast in all caps at checkout. This PDF I hope will help out a bunch of people and get more runners into the weight room with the right types of programming. And I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode.
Yeah, so I got obsessed because at that point I was working with more middle-aged folks when it comes into their training aspect of things, and we get into the science and the principles of just repeatability, sustainability, right, and just being able to repeat work day in or week after, and just gradually get a little bit better. And in the world of endurance, that's truly that zone 2, or I really like Phil Maffetone's work of that 180 minus your age and heart rate number to really find what's that work capacity that you can do that you can really spend a lot of time in. And just the biggest thing was finding that heart rate zone that essentially that hey, if I wanted to work out for an hour and a half today, or I wanted to work out for 30 minutes today, or I want to work out for 45, you can repeat this thing because it's at that heart rate. That's that aerobic base number. So anytime that I would go for a jog on the lakefront, or I'd go for like, because really during chiro school, that's where I got into this stuff. And that was my mental brain escape of studying and just getting out of the weeds of just doing school stuff.
Yeah.
So I would just go out and run, and especially during the spring, summertime. Chicago is one of the greatest cities for that. So I would get out and do that, and then it would always be at that heart rate pace. And then I just gradually kept getting a little bit faster and faster and faster at that pace. And then people would be like, "Hey, we got this half marathon coming up," or one of my friends and mentors had to sign up for the heavy half in Leadville, which in Colorado there like was an absolute the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
Oh,
Like
you
I
came
was
out to Leadville and ran?
oh yeah, the heavy half, man.
That's literally 45 minutes from where I am right now.
The thing about this is when we were like, oh my gosh, we got to the start line. Well, this is even a couple days beforehand where our Uber would pick us up. And again, this my mentor and I were out there, and he was I think low 50s at the time, but he was a chiropractor and he ran all the time. But he just was there just to kind of do it. He wasn't like a crazy pace guy. And the Uber driver was like, oh, like, what are you guys out here for? And we're like, oh, the Leadville heavy half. He's like, oh, what's your goal time? And Dr. Wolf or Aaron said, he's like, yeah, I'm going to try to finish like around 4 hours. He's like, no shot. You'll be less than 7. We get out of the car. And he's like, are you kidding me? Like, did that guy, like, what did I do to him? Just put that shut on me. And then, so we're just going through the day. He was just pissing at that Uber driver the whole day. And then we get to the starting line, we take our pre-race picture. We're walking up there. And we just coming from Chicago, a nice flat land. We get to the start line, and everyone around us has walking sticks, and we're like, "Oh my god, this guy might have been right. Like these guys are prepared to actually like climb up this thing." And we're looking at each other like, "Oh boy!" I mean, the steepness of how steep that trail was. I mean, it was. I couldn't. There was times I wanted to stop so bad, but I just knew it was a point-to-point race. So I was like, I just have to see that guy start passing me down. And it took, I don't know, I don't know what my time was, but I remember when I crossed, they said I was the first person from the Midwest to finish, which I kind of took it as a compliment because flat land versus, training in altitude and steepness up there. So, but yeah, so small stuff like that we just signed up with. And it was just really to get my head off of school because whether it's seminars and signing up for races, going somewhere doing that just allowed you to chuck through that time.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, Leadville, that's a different ballgame even from the altitude of like Denver, because it's a nonlinear relationship with the decrease in the partial pressure of oxygen. So like it's literally like an exponential decline in your ability to consume oxygen. That coupled with all of that crazy terrain that's very characteristic of Leadville races really adds a lot of challenge to those kinds of races. So
the day before the race, we were like, well, we gotta get ourselves used to this. So let's just take a CrossFit class.
Oh my God, no.
We took a CrossFit workout just to say, all right, let's get our lungs used to. I mean, it was just so funny, like the way we did this. And but in the end, you look back and see all the photos and videos, and like it was just worth it,
Yeah. And what has that buildup looked like? Are there some lessons that you've learned with your training and running programs specifically over time throughout this process of running multiple half marathons, a couple of marathons now, and now you're training for the big one being Boston?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is find your starting dose, right? Everyone says I'm not a runner, or running's too hard, or running's miserable. I mean, I couldn't tell you how many people come in here on a clinic basis for like, hey, this orthopedic or this PT or this chiro told me I should never run. It's not healthy for me, or my knees just can't take it. And I'm like, one, I take a breath and I'm like, all right, we'll go see how you move and see how everything happens. But more often than not, they just didn't have someone they can talk to get them going to at approachable pace, right? So for me, I'll have people do intervals through their yin yang all the way through until they get to a point where they, hey, now I can put together, running for 6 minutes at a time. I'll have them do 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, and repeat that 8, 10, 16, 20 times. Okay, now we're going to build a 45. So like that 1-to-1 ratio of walk to jog. And then that gradually gets them to, all right, let's learning about heart rate. Like I encourage people to get these running watches anytime we can, because when you learn, and I just love the method of 180 minus your age. and just never letting your heart rate get higher than that. Or if someone is kind of, doesn't want to do the technology right, I just have them do the nose only breathing. Hey, you're going to only breathe through your nose at that pace. And typically if they're a nuanced, newer runner, that will keep them underneath that heart rate. And it just slows them down, get people to slow down. And I always give them runs for the amount of time, not distance. Because when you give people the run of time, now it's whether I run my hardest or run very easy, I'm running for 30 minutes. Versus if you give someone a 5-mile distance, now, of course, their last mile, they're going to be like, screw this, I want to get this done with. There goes the intensity. Now my right heel's bugging me because that was the first time I ran that fast in, however many months. So when you give people time as their dosage, that gives them just a much better ability to slow down.
Yeah. And your body has no idea what a freaking mile is, like your body knows time on feet, and that coupled with intensity, like that's the true measure of a volume of a run, is the amount of time that it takes. And then you've also got the measure of intensity, and then you've got other factors to account for as well. But I think going with time, so many runners get super OCD with, I've got to run this many miles per week and things like that. And it's like those measures are just not the most important things that we need to look at. We need to look at time on your feet. We need to look at intensity, whether that be the pace that you're running or your heart rate, staying within that zone or staying within your predetermined intensity. And then we need to go from there. I think that's...
Well, think about this. Like, so when I have someone that says, hey, I want to train for a marathon. And if it's someone that it's a little bit of a stretch for them with what their time is and what, they have available to, and they'll say, how do you think I should start? And I'll go, okay, Debbie, you want to run a marathon in, 4 months. I go, what's your goal time? Because I always think like someone should have some sort of a goal to attain, because that's how every good program is made is, hey, what's a perceived goal? And, gradually make your way there. And she'll say, all right, I want to run it in just under 5 hours. I go, okay. So your first week of training is for 2 days out of the week, be on your feet for 5 straight hours. And she's like, what? I'm like, just stand, be on your feet for 5 straight hours. She's like, what do you mean? That's like super easy. I go, you don't understand. In 4 months, you're going to want to run for 5 straight hours. When's the last time you've been standing on your feet for 5 straight hours as a desk or wherever, And she's like, honestly, it's been a while. I go, that's why it's training. You know what I mean? Just be on your feet for 5 straight hours and you'll let me know how sore you are. So when you strip it back to that level and you just say, okay, this is where you're starting. And people are like, oh my God, I got my 2 days in. I did my 5. Okay, great. Now this is how you're going to compound that. And then, people are super surprised where they're at months and weeks going forward.
Yeah, I think that keys into something that we talked about in the part 1 is keying into consistency. It's not what you can do today, Debbie. We can go out and we can thrash you and then you'll feel terrible and then never want to speak to me again if I give you this hard workout that you think you need to do today.
Right.
We need to start with something that's manageable. Oh, you want to run for 5 hours? Can you just stand up and walk around for 5 hours? That's such a big thing, is we need to bridge the gap between where you are right this second and today to running that 5-hour marathon. That's such a crucial component, and something that I wish I had, like when I started college, I had these huge goals, right? Be an All-American, be on the, which I never got any of those, by the way.
All right.
And
work for it.
And, I would just start out with like, oh, well, I just need to hang with these guys in their workouts. And I would just absolutely obliterate myself in training. And then when race day would come around on the weekend, I would get crushed because I was just spilling out all of my motivation, all of my physiological capacity in the week leading up to the races. And then I get to the races and I'm just gassed,
Yeah.
And
well,
a lot of
to that point, to that exact point is like, if I look down at my marathon week right now, literally 2 of the workouts I kind of get queasy about out of the 6.
Yeah.
Like 2 of the ones are like, man, like that's going to be brutal. But the 4 other ones, it's just like, I got to run for an hour at like an easy pace. Like it's not scary at all in the workout, So a lot of times when people are like, man, I'm just going to run until it starts hurting. It's just like, well, if you do that, keep doing that, eventually your whole day's going to hurt, right? Because of your heel, knee, or whatever heck it is. So I think to what you've figured out as years gone on, it's like getting the the small doses in that allows you to build that base up. So now, all right, I do want to train for something that's worthwhile. Well, now you actually have something to go off of versus this up and down, and then you had no net gain.
Yeah. One thing I'm curious about with you is, do you utilize cross-training tactics for your training right now, or is it all just running and then a little bit of strength training?
So I'll always utilize the tools that like, with my day that just makes me the best way to get training in.
Mm-hmm.
So right now I have both a Peloton bike at home and I have a treadmill at home. So on my days so I made a 6 day per week running program with one day being off. I'll have one of my easy run days. I think I have 4 of those easier days in there. I'll either just run on those days or I'll do a bike instead for that. A lot of times that run would take, just because I know my heart rate will be at an equal pace for that, or perceived effort. So I'll use the Power Zone Endurance program on Peloton, which is kind of based off of your training level, and that will keep me at that same dosage, but just a different muscular feel. And then when I do my strength training, it's legit a strength lift. And then during my time of 2 to 3 minutes in between, I'll hop on my air bike that I got. So I got one of those Rogue Echo bikes, and then I'll just maintain a nose only breathing pace during my recovery. Cause then now my heart's moving, but I'm not like just sitting there doing nothing like a power lifter, but yet I can still go back into my heavy weight set and repeat a good strength effort. So I've found like that's been my happy medium of keeping cross training a thing, but yet not like saying I'm going to follow this program 100%. It's just, this is what my system allows me to do best.
Oh, I love that. So you're combining your strength training with your aerobic cross training kind of feels, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's great. And I think a lot of runners will really love that, because they'll go and think that they wasted their day with strength training, where you can combine those workouts. It's going to be more efficient as well as more effective in getting blood flow to that musculature, helping clear out all of those metabolites from the harder workouts that you're doing, so that then you can be more ready for the subsequent hard workouts later that week or the next day, etc.
The biggest thing that I would say is put that pace to it. Like, so it's got to be, if I'm going to do an air bike, like, again, my control is nose only breathing. Like, I'm not literally staring at my heart rate and saying I want to keep it at a certain rate. I'm just like, can I keep it at my nose only breathing? And I'll use my rower as two, and I don't typically use my treadmill in between strength lifts. I'll just do a non-impact rower or air bike.
Nice.
And it's, again, for that 2 to 3 minutes, because that's our ideal time range for strength to recover and repeat another high effort set.
How did your nutrition change getting into more endurance type? I know that you're really big in your nutrition, and you also give a lot of your clients a ton of nutritional advice to enhance their performance. So how did that change for you?
Yeah, so the biggest thing with my goal pace of going into Boston being a sub 250 end result, which ends up being like a 629 minute per mile pace, I know that my heart rate's going to be high at that. And with the higher heart rate training and performance that I'm gonna have to do at that end result, like, carbohydrates is your fuel source for high output training, right? Or high intense training. So that's why CrossFitters typically on a diet style, like, they're going to eat more carbs, because a lot of times their CrossFit workouts are a little bit higher intense, So for me with running, I don't track it right now, just because I've tracked for so long in my life that I can look at a plate of food and be like, that's 30 grams of protein. That's 200 grams of carb. Like, it's weird. Like, in college, my buddies would actually like put bets on, all right, how close can I get to a calorie amount, and when they would track it on their apps. And so I'm like, right now, I'd say around 450 to probably 475, 500 grams of carbs per day on a training day. And then my fats are pretty lower in numbers, because as carbohydrate allotment goes higher, I want to keep my fats relatively tame, and I try to shoot for half of my body weight in grams for that. So right now I weigh about 168, so half of that in grams of fat, and then my body weight in protein per day. So calorically, again, you could do those numbers. Sometimes if I go out to eat and I'm having a little bit more bread at the table, that my number may be a little bit higher, but roughly it's a lot of carbs throughout many meals throughout the day. And that's just what I have felt I can get the most out of myself training. And then I have like these Gatorade powder drinks all day throughout the day, because it gives me 20 grams at a time when I do it. And then I go to bed and I can repeat my work output the next day.
So I hope Brett and Taylor don't listen to this and hear that you're eating bread or anything like that, because
Oh,
I know.
carbosis. Me and Brett always text each other. I'll send them a meal and I'll just go carbosis. But the best thing about them too is like they understand like what's the goal. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, if I had an autoimmune problem to gluten and stuff, like I would be shoveling a bunch of rice down my throat, but I don't have that problem. And my wife makes fun of me all the time, or actually she's jealous because I have like a steel stomach where nothing really gives me issues. So I can really eat anything, and as long as it's giving me the performance benefit, like I'll have it. So right now for the next 5 weeks, all food is fuel right now until that race is over.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, Brett Winchester and Taylor Primer, they have their own podcast, Gestalt Education, where if you're a clinician and you don't know about that podcast, you need to know about it yesterday. So
Yeah.
definitely look at that stuff. But they're buddies of ours, and they're awesome guys. So we always have to give them a hard time about carbosis and things like that.
Low hanging fruit for them.
Yeah. So you're at 70 miles a week, still strength training once a week. What are some of the other factors that are really helping you? I know you're a big fan of cold plunges, which that's been a little bit controversial with the amount of muscular gains that you can get in terms of hypertrophy with cold plunges. But I know you're a believer and you do it every single morning. How has that changed your life?
Yeah.
Training?
Yeah, the biggest thing is I'd say sleep has been number one, which we talked about in the last podcast, is just prioritizing the amount of hours you can get. And that starts with ending your night sooner. That's the hardest part, is ending the night sooner, and then just waking up early. I always get my training in early in the morning, because once my day gets going clinically and coaching wise, like it's just not going to happen later in the day. So I'll knock that out early. And then when it comes into my recovery tactics, cold plunge has been huge. Luckily, I've had one at the house for the last handful of years. And it's just been something that I haven't married myself to the pre-workout plunge yet, or the post-workout plunge yet. Like for me, I really like to finish a run, be done with it, get in the cold plunge, do that, shower, get on with my day. Because again, I love the cold plunge for not only the recovery aspect, but the brain aspect. Like it puts me at a higher than I normally am, which people say is already too high. And when I keep going, it's just like it just allows me to keep the crazy schedule that I have at a normal amount for me. So that's why I like the whole research of blunt hypertrophy. It's like, unless your goal is to stand on stage and compete for money as your bodybuilder physique, it makes me feel better mentally, and it may not make someone feel better mentally. I think those are the people that just haven't tried it, or are just married to, I don't like the positives of cold plunging. But I've never had someone go in mine at my house and get out of it feeling worse than they got in. 0 times. Everyone got out of that and they're like, dude, I feel incredible. Whether you're female, male, whether you're someone that's just got to go to work every day and feel their best, or someone that's competing
At the Super Bowl, even,
Oh yeah, or
Coin guy.
Competing wrestling meet. Shout out Coin guy. So that's been a project of ours that we're looking into, making it a little bit easier for athletes in town to utilize one like that. So we may be knocking on the doors of opening a facility up that has 2 rooms for 2 state-of-the-art cold plunges for athletes to use. So
yeah. And now, when I was coming up in the running circles and stuff like that, we would do lower body submersion, but you're doing full body submersion in the cold plunge, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm going right up to the neck here, and you good?
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, good. So when I do mine, I go right up to the neck with it, and then the one at my house is like just big enough where if I dunk my head underneath it, like there's a chance that water would go over. So I typically don't do the dunk deal, but these bigger ones that are available, totally, what I would recommend that if someone got in, do the full dunk underneath it, get your face in there, because there's a whole mammalian, I'm butchering the name, but a mammalian reflex response that people get when the cold reaches their face, and there's another benefit to it. I just think it feels better too, because then now when you're totally underneath it and then get back out, you kind of like warm yourself up, because your face was under and now it's out. The worst part's over, essentially. But yeah, it's been incredible. So 2 to 3 minutes is essentially how I hit it at. We go all the way to 40 degrees with ours. My wife does it too, and she loves it as well.
That's amazing. Yeah. And then, yeah, we covered the cold plunge, we covered sleep. Any other supplemental stuff that's changed? Are you still taking creatine and stuff too?
Yeah, so creatine I still take daily, vitamin D I still take, and then since my like nutrition's been so dialed in, usually I'll be a omega-3 guy that I'll take through through pills, but now I just use the cod liver oil just through like a quick shooter in the morning, and I'll just do that before my easy runs because there's some people in the ketogenic world that say if you kind of have more of a fattier food source in the morning, then your body will trigger that to use as more as your energy source in those easy runs. So since I'm running at more of that aerobic pace, again, cat's out of the bag if that actually works or not, but I just have that before my easy runs. And then maybe I'm using more fat oxidation, which should help me, again, not burn through so many carbs once race day comes.
Yeah. And I think for runners, two things that runners will overlook are creatine supplementation as well as protein supplementation. So every runner knows that they need to get more carbohydrates unless they're in that ketogenic crowd, which that could be a whole nother, a whole nother thing. But really, runners are tearing up a lot of tissues as far as they're inducing a lot of muscular damage with these sustained efforts, whether that be your tempo runs or your long runs. That is muscular damage that's occurring. And we have to have protein intake commensurate to the amount of muscular damage that we're doing. So runners really need to focus a lot. And one thing that I didn't focus on when I was a runner was getting large amounts of protein commensurate to the amount of muscular damage that we're inducing with our workouts. So I love that you hit on protein. And then creatine also. There are way more muscle or way more cells in our body that uptake and utilize creatine than a lot of people think. From our neural system all the way down to, there are some studies now looking at the utilization and introduction of creatine to bone cells. So the last words that a runner wants to hear in an office like yours or mine is, you may have a stress fracture. Right. And your creatine and creatine stores within your muscles are going to enhance your strength training gains. So they're going to enhance the effectiveness of your strength training. And there is some literature that may suggest that bone cells themselves are responsive to creatine and can actually induce osteoblastic activity to lay down more bone mineral, which to me is like,
yeah,
like I'm doing that.
More no-brainers to take it. I mean, you know what I mean? So we talked about how whether you're an athlete or a normal everyday person, you should be supplementing with it. And that's just more fruit to the bag there, right? And to your point, when you said about the carbohydrate and protein amount, like realistically, carbohydrate and protein are anabolic, both of them together. Like they're both anabolic. And when we're trying to put tissue back onto our frame or repair tissue, if you're a runner who's constantly breaking down tissue, the first anabolic thing is to say, are you eating enough carbohydrate? And that's why before I even say like words like that, I'll just say, give me your normal day for you. And you can just hear through someone's normal day. If they have 2 meals a day and one of them is fruit snacks and the rest is like dinner, okay, they're wildly low on both of them. If one of them is they're a high school student and they wake up, they have Pop-Tarts, and then at lunch they have the school lunch, and then after school they don't have anything, and then they practice and they have their mom's dinner before they go to bed, and then they have a couple of ice cream desserts before they go to bed too. All right, they definitely have carbohydrate done. Is it the right sources? No, but they have plenty of those, but there's zero protein in this diet. I mean, I had a conversation with a softball athlete that she was in the midst of tryouts, and she was getting a bunch of reps in when it comes into the cages before tryouts to be her best for tryouts. And her shoulder was darn near, like it moved well joint wise, the tissue, there was no trigger points, like everything was rocking and rolling. It was her lead shoulder every time that she would swing. And I'm like, all right, let's listen to the nutrition side of things. I mean, she probably got 25 at most grams of protein in a day. And I'm like, hold on. Okay. This is what we're going to build up. I mean, she probably weighed 140 pounds. And I said, we got to get closer to this higher amount. And when we checked in with her, I mean, she actually, my shoulder's totally fine, like 100% fine. And it's like, all right, so that's why like you can do all the fun stuff. Like, man, I'm the soft tissue guy. I'm the KT tape guy. I'm the mobility guy. And you can put anyone into that basket when you're like, something ain't right here. Let's ask the right questions and then boom, hit it. So as any sort of athlete, having that protein allotment and carbohydrate amount, I think is crucial.
Gosh. Yeah. And, I ended the last episode saying I wish I'd had Jake Aleck in my corner when I was in high school, just telling me this kind of stuff. And luckily now, we have this platform that we can hopefully shout from the rooftops like, hey, we need to be looking at all these other factors, not just your training load, because you need to just trust your coach with giving you the right amount of training load. But you need to be doing all of these other things, such as getting your sleep, focusing on your sleep, focusing on your macronutrients, carbohydrates, as well as fats, and especially protein. And then if you're doing well with those, look at the quality of your meals, the quality of those macronutrients, and then maybe thinking about supplementation on top of that, only if we've got these basics covered.
Yeah, like create the team, right? Like everyone should have a team around them. Like even if I look at my phone, like I have my guys that I reach out to that when it comes into my business device that I need to just reach out to, and when something hits the fan, like all right, what do I do? I have my buddies that whenever I need a good laugh out of, like I reach out to them. Everyone has their own team of like things that they need. But when you're a growing athlete, and especially in grade school, high school, like it's not up to the parents, but it kind of is. It's like, how can I get my young adult into the right hands where they can teach not only them but the entire family? Because like I talked about earlier, it takes a community, it takes truly a household in order to maximize any growing athlete's development. And what's mom and dad buying at the grocery store? If you're working with someone who's into nutrition, like the parents should be there at that meeting listening to what their son or daughter should be eating, because they're the one buying it, and then they're the one grabbing stuff on the way home. If they're it doesn't give us any good for me to tell someone, hey, you have to have this type of food, but then after every practice mom's stopping at McDonald's to grab hey, what does everyone want? It doesn't work that way. So the best team environment that you can have, and then for us, always networking with other coaches and trying to fill in the gaps anywhere that we can help, to say, hey, we know you got the programming stuff down, we know the sport really well. Anything that we can help with the strength conditioning side of things, or how to maximize your mobility, post-training, pre-training, like something where we can just fill those gaps and that they may not know about, let us help, and I think that's where the best teams are formed, and that's what allows the entire community to rise. Because like you asked earlier, what does it take for our high school to reach, basketball is really good, football is really good, track's really good. Like there's so many sports here that are unbelievable for a public school, and it truly takes the community to have all those different aspects that allows everyone to thrive.
Awesome, Jake. Now, where can people reach out or follow you for some mobility tips, or see how your training's going, or reach out to you for some consulting work?
Yeah, so clinically and more like my professional side, it's all at Aleck PTP, and that's the name of my clinic's Aleck Pain to Performance. So that's going to be on Instagram there, or you can just straight up email me at jake@aleckpaintoperformance.com. But everything that I do personally is going to be on my personal page of at dr.jake.aleck. You're going to see pictures of our dogs. You're going to see pictures of my wife. You're going to see pictures of me running, cold plunging, just doing all things. You're going to see a bunch of athletes, PR in their lifts and doing things, but like, it's just like my POV. I call it when it comes to my personal page. In general though, you reach out to me on Instagram. That's probably the best, because whether it's a message or an email, I'm on both of those consistently.
Awesome. So from 8 yards to 26.2 miles, getting ready for Boston, doing so injury-free. How could we distill this whole conversation? We've talked about so many different things, from going from strength training to nutrition to supplementation to types of training, programming, etc. If you had to give us an ounce of prevention, what would you say to athletes, coaches, and providers for these endurance athletes?
Yeah, I'm going to say, look at yourself, and I'm going to quote David Goggins here: do the hard thing, right? There's someone out there that's really, really, really good at getting their workouts in. There's someone out there that's really good at eating the right things, but are awful at managing their sleep. There's someone that's really good at managing their sleep, but, just can't put together, stretching for a little bit before they go to bed. So whatever your hard part is, like we talked about a lot of things that, whether it's all these different pillars that, makes into a good runner, whether it's strength training, mileage, sleep or nutrition, whatever is hard to you, take what we said and say, how can I implement that today? And then continue to repeat it. Right. So I'm not going to say that there's one big thing that I would tell myself as a growing athlete, but I would say whatever my hardest thing that I wasn't doing, or is just a little bit resistant for me to do, I'm going to pick that one, because when you pick the hard thing, you're arguably getting way better because you're doing something that you're the least good at. Right. Again, the example David Goggins gave when he was out there, he goes, running isn't the hard thing for me. It was initially, but I do it so often now that's not hard. He goes, I read books now because I'm not the smartest person in the room, and that's my hard thing. And then for me, when we got the cold plunge, the cold plunge, I hated cold when I was in college. I was the guy that didn't last too long when we did the cold therapy right after 2 days. And when I visited all these different colleges, and all of these colleges are creating their hot tubs into cold plunges now because they're just noticing the benefits that these athletes are getting. And I just did the cold shower approach for a couple months, and I was like, holy cow, it's miserable, but I would get the benefit from it. And that was my hard. And then now, as I continue to repeat that, the Boston training is my hard, because it's miserable every time I do these weeks. And, once that training's done, I'll find something else to be hard to keep getting better each year at a time.
Not only better as an athlete, but also as a person too, right?
Right, better than before. That's our name of the clinic. So
yeah,
we hope to keep that down no matter way we can.
Amazing, Jake. Well, we're definitely going to have you on for some more part threes, or whatever your next hard thing is. We're going to learn how you tackled that as well. And thank you so much for donating this time to the Art of Prevention, and to all my listeners here. And I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. And whatever your hard thing is tomorrow, Nick Hedges. Maybe it's hitting on a 12 when you're at playing blackjack, right? As Vegas would call us out for. Would do the hard thing.
Yeah, hip mobility. That's my hard thing.
There we go. Plenty of pages online you can see to get some pointers if you need.
Oh yeah. All right, buddy. Well, I'll be talking soon. Okay.
Thanks, Nick.
I hope that you enjoyed this episode of the Art of Prevention podcast. If you did enjoy and or benefit from some of the information in this podcast, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share this podcast. Or please give us a 5-star review on any platform that you find podcasts. One thing to note, that this podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. No patient is formed, and if you are having any difficulty, pain, discomfort, etc. with any of the movements or ideas described within this podcast, please seek the help of a qualified and board-certified medical professional, such as your medical doctor or a sports chiropractor, physical therapist, etc.